From London, I'm political editor Nicholas Cecil.
I'm Deputy Political Editor Jitendra Joshi.
And I'm Chief Political Correspondent Rachael Burford.
And this is The Standard Podcasts, a week's a long time in Westminster.
I have just returned from Buckingham Palace, where I accepted an invitation from His Majesty the King to form the next government of this great nation.
So, it's results day. The votes have been cast and counted. We now know pretty much what the political makeup of the country looks like. It's been a big landslide win for Labour, but how bad has it been for the Tories?
It's been calamitous. It's been disastrous. It's been, fill in your preferred adjective. It's not been good. The only slight caveat to that is it could have been worse if you believe some of the direst predictions we saw in these MRP polls that we were all obsessing with over these last few weeks.
Yeah, they were suggesting majorities of 250, weren't they?
Yeah, with the Tories going down in the very worst projection. In one poll, the Tories were forecast to go down to 53 seats. In the event, it's not been that bad, but let's not try and gloss over this for a party that's seen itself as the natural party of power for nearly 2 centuries. To go down to 120 odd seats is appalling.
Yeah, it really is. And 12 cabinet ministers also losing their seats, and people like Liz Truss, you've short-lived, but a former prime minister in what was her majority? 22,000?
Just over 26,000.
26,000, yeah, incredible.
And she was unrepentant to the last.
And she's really largely to blame for this, isn't she? Because it was, okay, Rishi Sunak had his faults and he made mistakes like the D-Day blunder coming back early from France. But the biggest issue for the Tories, I think, was Liz Truss, her mini budget, her disastrous premiership, and voters just didn't forgive the Tories for that.
No, and you could almost say there's a certain delusion there, because in her interviews after that shock result was announced during the night, she said the problem was not there wasn't not enough Trussism in the country. We need even more.
They seem just never to learn, do they?
No.
No. And you can really see how calamitous that mini budget was by where the Lib Dems picked up seats. I mean, Ed Davey has done so well. The Lib Dems have done amazingly in this election, 71 seats. And they picked up a lot in those, former Tory areas where there were a lot of mortgage holders, essentially. And people suddenly saw their monthly bills absolutely skyrocket after that budget. And they've managed to pick up all these seats, the Lib Dems, because those homeowners blame the Tories for that.
I mean, we should note that her seat in particular, South West Norfolk, was taken by Labour, but you're absolutely right. The party that's really benefited across southern England, the home counties, by and large, has been the Lib Dems.
And we should really mention the B word, shouldn't we? At Westminster, they don't like talking about it very much, but it's Brexit. The impact of Brexit is still being felt in Britain, that there are a lot of Remainers who still haven't forgiven the Tories for this. And one good example is if you look at Esher and Woolton, just on the outskirts of London, a hugely wealthy seat, a solid Tory for years and years and years, and it's gone Lib Dem. Epsom and Ewell, it's gone Lib Dem. Winchester, it's gone Lib Dem. It's just extraordinary how much shadow there is now in southern England.
What's striking is that depending on which part of the country you are in, there is a reason to passionately hate the Tories, whether it's Brexit and the impact of mortgages in those more well-to-do parts of the south and southeast, whether it's Partygate and broken promises in other parts of the country. There is a smorgasbord of reasons to passionately want to see the back of the Tories. And they were Rishi Sunak, at the end of the day, was on a hiding to nothing against that tidal wave of hate.
Yeah. It's hard to say. I've been up for, I think we've all been up for like a solid 30 hours now. It's hard to remember where exactly everyone's picked up seats. But yes, I mean, incredible win for Labour. I mean, not the massive, huge landslide that they were predicting in some polls, but still a very, very significant landslide for Keir Starmer and a huge majority. that he's going into Downing Street with today.
But if you actually look at the Labour vote share, that's hardly gone up at all. So there's no real great wave of enthusiasm for Labour. It's just that people want the Tories out. And it's really, isn't it Reform who've really done the damage?
Labour's vote share has gone up about 2 points, which is a not very large amount at all from 2019. The real story there is that the Tory share has collapsed by 20 points or more, and they're facing a huge erosion of support in all the places where they can ill afford it, be it by the Lib Dems, as we've discussed in those parts, be it by Labour in the so-called Red Wall in the north of England, but particularly by Reform across the country. Reform have ended up with, we think, 4 seats, but equally the bite they've taken out of the Tory apple pie has left a pretty bitter taste.
And it's really like Reform is a political wrecking ball. So yes, they've got 4 seats. Yes, they've got Nigel Farage in the Commons, and Lee Anderson's back. But 4 seats. The Greens have got 4 seats. Plaid Cymru have got 4 seats. Farage is very good at breaking things. We know that. He damaged the British economy with Brexit. Now we need to see whether he can actually do anything constructive.
Yeah, and like you said, they've got 4 seats, but we've now got 5 independent MPs across the country who ran on these, mainly ran on these sort of pro-Palestinian, pro-Gaza tickets. So it's definitely been a weird election in many ways. It almost feels like, because of the voting system that we've got, we are sort of still a 2-party state, but there's a lot of smaller parties breaking through now, and independents.
In the end, the polls probably turned out to be largely right, especially the exit poll, for example, when that broadcast at 10 o'clock last night. That was a kind of a seismic moment in British political history. It predicted a win for Labour on the scale of Tony Blair. So kind of some people will try and play it down because it's not as big as those MRP polls, but it's a huge win in the end.
Yeah.
The real challenge all the pollsters had, and we saw this also play out a little bit in the exit poll, is what Rachael mentioned, which is the rise of third-party candidates, single-issue campaigners, the rise of the Green Party, Reform in some parts of the country. It's hard to capture that in a polling structure that's really aimed at, recording support for 2, perhaps 3 parties nationally. And we saw that really playing out in some of the individual projections, which were just way out. They were just not. Some of the projections were never going to happen. Reform, for instance, their level of support was all over the map. Depending on which poll you saw. And
I think some of the most surprising results of the night that were just not in the MRP poll at all were places where these single issue parties or independents won. Jonathan Ashworth losing his seat in Leicester South, that was a sort of shocking result in many ways. He is a member of the shadow cabinet. He would have been Paymaster General today. Instead, he lost his seat by 900 votes. There was a few like that as well. Independents picked up seats in Birmingham, Dewsbury and Batley, where Heather Iqbal was standing for Labour. She was a close aide to Rachel Reeves. So there has been, these independents picking up seats that were not predicted. The only one that wasn't perhaps quite as shocking was obviously Jeremy Corbyn, who the pollsters did say was a toss-up in that seat. They did say Labour was ahead, but in the end he won that pretty convincingly.
He did, and that's another example of where the polls didn't really capture what was going on ground level. You walk around Islington North in the last couple of weeks, and leaflets are getting sent out. The official Labour campaign was invisible, frankly. In comparison to Jeremy Corbyn's ubiquitous presence, which in almost sort of strayed into the potential illegal with lots of fly posters appearing all of a sudden everywhere.
They deny that was their fault.
They deny that was anything to do with the campaign. I did see 2, let's assume they're Corbyn supporters, with a bucket of paste and a large brush posting a picture up on a wall.
We shouldn't really forget the Greens as well. Keir Starmer's, he'll be announcing his cabinet today, but he's got a slight problem there. He needs a culture secretary, doesn't he?
Yes, poor old Dagam Debonair. She lost her seat to the Greens in Bristol. That was one that the pollsters had kind of predicted, but I think a lot of people thought just because of the big, surge in Labour support that she might just hold on. But no, she didn't. And the Greens did very well, picking up 4 seats. Right, let's go to a quick ad break.
Coming up in the second half, we'll look at London in detail. Was it a disastrous night for the Tories? Did a red Labour tide sweep across the capital? And did the Lib Dems win Wimbledon? So welcome back to A Week's a Long Time in Westminster. So what happened in London last night?
I also want to place on record my enormous thanks to the people of Islington North for electing me for the 11th time as their Member of Parliament.
It has been a great privilege to serve Kingston and Surbiton and this great community over many years, and I'm humbled that you've given me the chance to serve you again.
Well, in inner London, the Tories were wiped out. They now have 0 MPs. They lost the seat of cities of London and Westminster. That means the King wakes up for the first time ever in a Labour constituency. And they also lost Kensington and Bayswater. The most interesting seat probably, though, was Chelsea and Fulham.
Yes, I was at the Chelsea and Fulham count, where poor old Greg Hands, who's been MP there for nearly 20 years, lost his seat by 152 votes to Ben Coleman, the Labour candidate. Big coup for Labour. It was also Ben Coleman's birthday, so everyone sang happy birthday to him at the counts about 6:30 in the morning. So we'd done a couple of...
Everyone except Greg.
Everyone except Greg, yeah. They had to have a couple of recounts because it was very, very tight. I think actually when it became sort of clear that Labour had won and they were just sort of counting up those last few votes, I was talking to one of the Hammersmith councillors, Labour councillors who've been canvassing on polling day. And he said he was canvassing on the King's Road and a purple Ferrari went past him and then a red Lamborghini overtook the purple Ferrari. And he thought, surely we're not going to win here. But they did by a whole 152 votes. And the Labour staffers and councillors and candidates there were just absolutely... Well, they couldn't really believe it in some ways because it's a constituency that doesn't feel the impact perhaps of some of the issues that the rest of the country does. I mean, one of the big talking points there has been private school fees because over half of parents in that constituency send their children to fee-paying schools, and that is obviously not a big issue in other parts of the country, and it's something that Labour have pledged to add VAT to private school fees. So that's been coming up on the doorstep a lot. So, yes, very big win for Labour there.
But if Chelsea and Fulham was tight, Hendon was ultra tight, wasn't it?
15 votes. And it took a while to fully determine that. Hendon, along with neighbouring constituencies such as Finchley, were for many years very much true blue territory. Finchley was famously Maggie Thatcher's old stomping ground, but like Hendon, that went to Labour this time, albeit by a bigger margin of just over 4,500 votes. And there were some jitters for Labour supporters over the similar issue we talked about in Chelsea and Fulham about private school fees and the impact that would have, because there's a lot of kids in Finchley are educated in Jewish private schools. And so there was some concern how that might play, and certainly the Tory candidate there, Alex Dean, was making a big play on that. In the event, Sarah Sackman, the veteran of the Jewish Labour movement, managed to bring the seat back and brought home a message that Labour under Keir Starmer is a safe space for Jewish voters again after all the controversies we saw under Jeremy Corbyn.
And it was also an excellent night for the Lib Dems in London. They were targeting 3 seats, Wimbledon, Sutton and Cheam and Carshalton and Wallington. And in Ed Davies' words, it was a game, set, and match for them. They won all 3. There was also an interesting rematch in Uxbridge and South Ruislip in West London. So that was won by the Tories in a by-election last year, but that was by just 495 votes. The same 2 candidates went head-to-head this time, Danny Beales for Labour and Steve Tutwell for the Conservatives. And the result basically just flipped. So the Labour won by 587 votes. So these margins can be really very tight.
Yeah, it was an interesting one, Oxbridge, because Labour were predicted to win it, but they were predicted to win it last time as well. Obviously, the whole controversy over ULEZ stopped them. I think one of the interesting ones where the Tories did hold on, and that's Chingford. See, Ian Duncan Smith managed to hold on there because Labour split the vote basically between the independent, Fraser Sheen, who decided to stand as an independent after being, ousted at the last minute as the candidate, and I think she and the Labour candidate both got about 12,000 votes each, and Ian Duncan Smith managed to come up the middle with about 17,000. So it's a real coup for him as well.
Also, I think what we've seen in the last few hours is the sheer speed and I'd say brutality of the British electoral system. That, like you look to America, they have a transition period. Here, kind of by mid-morning, Jeremy Hunt, the Chancellor, was walking out of Downing Street for the last time. And you had all these cabinet ministers, a lot of them who thought they're probably going to win, all their dreams and their parliamentary careers, kind of Grant Shapps, Penny Mordaunt, Gillian Keegan. A few weeks ago, I suspect none of them were fearing they were going to lose their seats.
No, and it raises the question of who's left for the Tories, which big hitters are left, and who can take command of the wreckage that's been left by this election result. Rishi Sunak has said he's going to step down as Tory leader, but not immediately. He wants to give a bit of time and space for a mechanism to be put in place for an orderly progression and to elect a new leader, which is very much in accordance with what some of the veteran Tory MPs and figures who have survived this bloodbath are demanding. But we're already seeing the first skirmishes start to break out of what's going to become, in all likelihood, a pretty full-on civil war between factions in the Tory party, with Suella Braverman and the like on one side, and centrists who have survived like Jeremy Hunt and Health Secretary Victoria Atkins, Tom Tugendhat, people like that on the other.
Who's your prediction for who's going to be next Tory leader?
Who knows where the party goes? But it's and we should also mention people like Kemi Badenoch and Priti Patel, who are very much in the mix. Liz Truss less so now, of course. It's really going to come down to a question of where they want to go as a party, and do they follow Labour's example, which is to descend into utterly self-destructive internecine fighting for a while until they get their act together, or do they just skip the civil war bit and be a grown-up party again?
Well, I think for the Tories there's a risk, a danger that they actually swing to the right here, and that's partly because the Lib Dems won so many seats, and the seats that they fight against the Tories tend to be against moderate centrist Conservatives, and so a lot of them have lost their seats. So there might be a slightly more right-leaning Tory party after this election than previously.
Possibly, but they've also lost a lot of figures in the old Labour Red Wall, seats that they never imagined taking before Boris Johnson came on the scene in the 2019 election. A lot of those people have gone now. People like Jonathan Gullis, who's the Tory deputy chairman, who was making increasingly hysterical claims about Labour policy during the election campaign. So it's fascinating. It could very much go either way, and because of the way the Tory party is structured for its leadership election battles, and this is what we saw play out between Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss, it's really down to the parliamentary party to try and impose some order here before it goes to the members, because once it reaches that stage, well, they wanted Liz Truss, and we all know what happened then.
Turning our focus back onto Sir Keir Starmer, so he's in Downing Street now, exhausted, 6-week campaign, and now the hard work really starts. So he's got a country to run, he's got to settle his family in, he's got the public finances in a dire strait, NHS is in a sickly state, there's Putin's war in Ukraine. So he's probably done the easy part now, really, and it's going to get far more challenging now.
Yeah, we're certainly not going to be taking a long recess, are we? Like we should have been.
But what's striking is what he's pledging not to do. He's pledging that We're no longer going to have what he called an era of noisy performance. This is about sober government, boring government even. I mean, by his own admission, Keir Starmer's, nobody's idea of a circus act. He's all about being serious, getting down to brass tacks after some of the more extreme forms of entertainment we've seen in political times of recent years.
That sounds eminently sensible. Well, that's episode 4 of A Week's A Long Time in Westminster. And it really has been a long time. We're all pretty exhausted. I'm sure the politicians are far more exhausted, and I think we all need a holiday and to get some sleep. I don't think that's going to happen anytime quite soon, but roll on August.
For all the latest news, head to standard.co.uk or pick up a newspaper.
The Standard podcast will be back tomorrow at 4 p.m.